Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of I Got Gameplay. Of course, we're on episode 124. 124 episodes. That's really, really cool. And to celebrate, of course, we have a very, very special guest. He's been on the show before, and he requested to come back, which is kind of awesome. Never had someone request to come back. Wonder why.
Hi, it's me, Fungo. How's it going, everyone?
Yes, it's Fungo. And tonight we're going to be talking Bloodborne, and we're going to be doing something kind of different. We were going to go into sort of kind of a gaming news thing, but instead we're going to focus the show on Bloodborne because Fungo has a lot to say. And first I want to ask you a little question, Fungo, in terms of your process, because you've been doing the Bloodborne videos, and in terms of those videos, you tend to break down your games in terms of parts. So you release a load of different videos, you look into the entire lore of that, and you also...
I leave no stone unturned.
Yeah, and that's really good. Like, in terms of completionists, you usually see them go through some nook and crannies of the games, but never kind of this in-depth. So
yeah, it depends on my interest in the game, of course. In Bloodborne, obviously, I'm very interested, which is why I have been releasing so much content on Bloodborne lately. And I think as of today, it finally dawned on me, I know everything there is to know about Bloodborne. I know that's kind of a presumptuous thing to say, but I think I know just about everything there is to know about Bloodborne.
How do you kind of get yourself into that direction of knowing everything about the game? Is it kind of being interested in the game, or is it more something where you have to find out?
Well, it's both because, one, I'm very interested in the game and the lore and, trying to discover, the background behind the developer's intentions, by reading into the little side quests and story and all the little notes and stuff that you read. It's kind of like the same process I went through with Silent Hill, because Silent Hill has lots of little notes and lore and hidden things, side quests and stuff that you can miss your first time, but then the second time through you'll notice. Those type of things. My process basically goes I get the game and I play through it once, and then I go, wow, that was an amazing game. My second playthrough usually is just recording all the cutscenes, all the side quests, and trying to, figure out different branches, the way different side quests can branch off to. And by doing, to actually do that, without, wasting countless hours and playing multiple playthroughs, I actually back up a save to the storage cloud on PlayStation Network before any major point or any major, decision in the game. So before I make a decision or before, a big turning event in the game, I'll upload a save or a backup copy to a USB storage device, and then I'll play through and see how that goes. All right, and then I'll back up that save and then reload my old save and see what happens if I do something different. And that's how I kind of uncover everything a little bit more quickly. And the game only came out like last month, late last month, and it hasn't even been out a month yet. So I think, in that amount of time for a Souls series game, being able to say that I know everything about the game is actually... I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not really sure. Because I would say Bloodborne is very, very smaller. And it's very smaller in scale when compared to Dark Souls series.
Well, you can look at it as well in terms of passion, isn't it, though? Because you're passionate about the game that you're playing. So you want to...
I think it has a lot to do with the atmosphere, to be honest. Gotta love the Gothic, Victorian era, 1300s plague-ridden type atmosphere. Instead of like the Black Plague, the game has like the Beast Plague going around, which is kind of similar in two ways. People kind of turn into these crazed beast creatures. Whereas in the 1300s in Europe, people were slowly dying of a plague. It took about a week, and they would pretty much lose their sanity at some point too. So it's very similar in terms of concept. I see where the developers came up with the idea, but then they throw in this Victorian era. Sorry, not Victorian. They throw in this what is it called? Lovecraftian like type theme, where it's very H.P. Lovecraft in a sense that they have to throw in these great giant mysteries, these celestial beings that, you see and eventually fight throughout the game. I'm not sure if you're aware of those. I guess maybe I should ask you, how much have you played of Bloodborne? How much have you heard?
Well, for myself, for most people who know, I'm actually kind of on a gaming lull. I've been checking out a lot of what you've been doing in terms of Bloodborne and also a lot of the playthroughs, because I've been wanting to get this game. I'm a big fan of the Souls series of games. I've played Dark Souls, was actually the first thing I ever played on my channel, I was able to game test and also get myself a copy via Namco Bandai, thank you guys, of Dark Souls 2. So in terms of the games themselves, I was really eager to play this, but sadly I don't own a PlayStation 4. And
I feel one of your questions is how does it stack up to Dark Souls or Demon Souls?
That's exactly it. How does it stack up? Because in terms of the Souls series, this was unofficially, people were calling it the next sort of series.
They were calling it Demon Souls 2, right?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with Demon Souls. I can tell you that right off the bat. Bloodborne is this entirely different universe. It's completely separate of Demon Souls. It's a brand new IP. And I can't even say I can compare it to Dark Souls, to be honest, or Demon Souls. It's very different in terms of gameplay and atmosphere. It's a much faster game, and stamina regenerates faster, and attack moves are faster, and everything just overall is much faster paced in Bloodborne than it is in the past games.
Is that due to the fact that it's like on the PlayStation 4, it's kind of on the next gen console, or is it more the fact that they did this for a purpose?
No, I don't think that, it had anything to do with being next gen or whatever. I think that they decided to do the fast pace just because they wanted to make it fun, and they wanted to make it very accessible. In terms of difficulty, though, I would say it's actually a little bit easier than the Souls series, to be honest. And, I'm a really, really big fan of Dark Souls 1. I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls 2. And personally, I do like Dark Souls 2 better than Dark Souls 1 in some regards. I like them both for different reasons, but Dark Souls 2 I find to be more replayable.
Horror, you did release a video on your channel saying...
And I did release a video on my channel saying that how Dark Souls 2 isn't as good as Dark Souls 1. But that's the thing. I was going to do a counter video to shock and surprise everyone how Dark Souls 1 isn't as good as Dark Souls 2. But I never got around to actually doing that. But I did scroll some notes down, but I never finished it. But yeah, there are some redeeming qualities to Dark Souls 2. I mean, they both have its pros and cons. Demon Souls, on the other hand, and I read some developer interviews on Demon Souls. It was going to be pretty much garbage when they pretty much said it was doomed. It was doomed and it was going to be a failure. But then Miyazaki, which is now the president of From Software, he just recently became the president, actually. And I think it's due to Bloodborne. It's 1 million sales in its first week, was it?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So, yeah, he's president now. And it was Miyazaki who stepped in on Demon Souls, who said, hey, you know what? This game is doomed for failure anyway. Why not just take my ideas? And pretty much any of his ideas he threw out there, they went, yeah, okay, whatever, let's do it. This game's going to fail anyway, so let's do it. And that's why Demon Souls ended up being a better game than what it was originally going to be. And I love the Silent Hills-ish kind of like figure things out on your own of the whole series, beginning with what is it called? Kingsfield. Is the actual predecessor to Demon Souls. And it dates back to Kingsfield. And then Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, they all have this very obscure way of storytelling that there is a definite answer to everything, but you must read the item descriptions, you got to read all the notes strewn about, you got to read into it a little bit and follow the side quests and stories and talk to characters and to get the full understanding of the story. Now, I came in a little little too late on Dark Souls. I actually just played Dark Souls like 3 years after it came out, and then went on to the sequel immediately after. And I was a little too late in Dark Souls, so I couldn't release the content that I'm releasing now for Bloodborne. But now that Bloodborne's out, I feel like I have full reign. Now that I have full understanding of it, I can pretty much explain everything there is to be explained about.
And you're kind of an enigma in that sense, because a lot of YouTube channels do playthroughs, but they've never gone inside the nook and crannies of the game before the way that you do. It's kind of one of the
people really like lore and explanation videos, to be honest. Those take off pretty well on YouTube.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the thing. I find with your channel, I was saying this to you while we were off the show, kind of off air in a sense, was that I found one of the reasons why I migrate to your channel a lot more, and a lot of it started with your whole, the whole Silent Hill series that you guys did previously, is because you will take a game and you will talk about everything. Even when I saw your Terraway review, you talked about every nook and cranny. And I had a friend of mine who said to me recently that he wanted to purchase the new 3DS. He's like, how does it look? And I went, check out Fungo's review, because he goes through everything.
Yeah, and that video disappointingly didn't get very many views, but I can understand why, because I don't know if people really were looking for that type of information, but it's people like you who share that I'm very grateful for, so that's nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I always do, and I try and get my followers to kind of share as well, especially those who love I Got Gameplay.
I tend to break apart things, and I'm very against the whole 3-minute IGN. I'm not going to name names. I'm just leave that out. 3-minute reviews, slap a number on it, and say, okay, there you go, there you have at it. And it doesn't really give you a sense of, well, is this game for me or not? I want people to know if a game is for them. Yeah, and by going into it,
it's like you're selling a car, for instance. You'll go in terms of the steering. You'll look at basically all the features. You take them for a tour inside, and also look at basically how many owners this thing has had and what's inside it. Maybe check the engine out, because you want to know everything about it. And I feel like a lot of these short reviews don't do that. They're like, this is a game, this is what it has, this is in short what you can do if you want.
And I since abandoned numbers on my reviews. I just give it a, if it's for you, this is basically how I do it. I say, if this is your sort of game, if you played games like this in the past and you find them fun, then get it. If you haven't played anything like this, and it may be a little foreign to you, so maybe you can let it pass for now. Stuff like that. Sorry for the noise.
No noise.
So yeah, basically it becomes like the difference between Dark Souls and Bloodborne is speed. Of course, the speed of combat. So, I guess if I'm selling either Dark Souls or Bloodborne to someone, I would say, well, what do you like? Do you like fast-paced combat, or maybe slowly building up your character, upgrading, farming, that type of gameplay? Well, if farming and building up your character and armor, if that's your thing, slow-paced, Dark Souls. Bloodborne is more about just fast-paced combat. I mean, there really isn't a whole upgrade system in Bloodborne, but things scale with your level. So, pretty much all your armor will scale with you when you level up. So I guess if you're looking for more fast-paced and just want to jump right in, but have a little difficulty and challenge along the way, then Bloodborne's more for you. That's how I would break it apart.
So let's go in terms of the game itself. I'm a great story person. I love to see story and how a game is kind of laid. And you said one of the things that drew you into Bloodborne as well, apart from the atmosphere, is the story, because it has so many intertwining stories that go on at the same time. It's a kind of a game of subtext in a sense.
Well, the intertwining stories really are told through the NPCs, which are the characters in the game, which they have their own stories. They're completely separate of the plot. There's only one mega plot that's going down the whole game. And to understand that plot is to, really read into all the little details. But you really start to understand the NPCs, what they are, the whole blood healing thing. The game is based around blood healing. Yarnum is the name of the city that you're based in, and it's actually the name of the queen who once resided there, who once ruled the land, basically, and her name was Yarnum. And they started getting into this like blood healing, this blood treatment, and consuming or whatever they do with blood to heal themselves. And then they started getting into using the blood of these celestial great ones. That's what they call them, that they worship. I hope I'm not spoiling too much, but these great ones they worship, and a lot of people in the healing church seem to really have an obsession to become like them, to gain enough insight to pretty much line their brain with eyes, as they say in the game, exact quote, to actually have the enlightenment that these creatures have. They want to be on par with them. So that's basically the point of using old blood. Old blood is from the great ones, blood of the great ones. And by using it and maluse of it, that's what caused the plague epidemic in Yarnum. And that's why people are turning into beasts, is because of the misuse. But also, they're harvesting and experimenting on great ones, have corrupted people and made people go insane because of the frenzy curse. I don't know if you're aware of what frenzy is, but frenzy in the game acts like instant damage. You explode with like an abundant amount of damage, like 800 points just gone, and you have to heal a couple times. Well, what frenzy really is, in the sense of the plot, frenzy is insanity. It basically is what drives people insane. And these celestial great ones have that power to drive people insane just by looking at them. I forget what they call them, but there's these brains with eyes on them. They're called celestial light lanterns or celestial lights or something. They just look at you, and just by looking at you, they can make you go insane. And so, in turn, there's a lot of characters in the game that have literally gone insane because of these creatures, because of their experimentation with them. And they're encountering them and trying to get old blood from them and gain their insight and knowledge of the arcane powers that they possess.
So, in terms of insight, because you talk about this a lot as well, in terms of like how to get easy access to insight, and how it's kind of misused in order to. It's one of those things that kind of sends the whole place into kind of berserk in a sense. Transforms humans into these monsters and beasts.
But it's basically human obsession that's causing a lot of it.
But again, it's got some very political first world contents on that because of.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A lot of wars, a lot of incidents, even a lot of diseases are kind of man-made, and it's because of our curious nature to kind of look into things, but also
that's exactly what's going on. Yeah,
but it also weaponizes things as well at the same time. So, but the one thing that kind of intrigues me the most about this, in a sense, is that a lot of people had an issue with the start of the game, and something that you went into detail about as well, how where the game starts, and sorry for those who haven't played it, spoilers.
Well, we should know this is a Bloodborne podcast. There's going to be spoilers.
Pretty much. You end up, dying at the beginning of the game. There's nothing you can do to kind of resolve that because you're not equipped. There's no weapons. You're going around just basically using the fists. How about
okay? There is a little, I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but I didn't add this information in the video. But you don't necessarily have to die at the beginning. You can run past the wolf. You can run past the next enemy that you see, lower the ladder, and get to the second lantern and go to the hunter's dream after that. But the way I see it is it's much faster to die via the wolf. Just to stand there and let it kill you, because you get to the hunter's dream faster, for one. And second, you can respawn from that same lantern and explore to your heart's content. If you rush to the second lantern, you'll miss a lot of really valuable items, like 10 blood vials, 10 bullets, those things that really get you started out.
So, in essence, dying is basically the quickest way to kind of immerse yourself in the game.
Yeah.
It's a red herring in a sense, because they're like, okay, go to the second lantern, But
you could rush it to the second lantern, and a lot of people say. I got a lot of comments on that video where it's like, "Oh, this is bogus," This is stupid. I don't believe this guy. I'm stopping this video right now. Unsubscribe, because I didn't mention that you could run to the second lantern. But I don't agree with that because you miss out on some valuable exploration.
Yeah, and like some amazing items that you can get that can help you through the game, and it's all.
Yeah, if you just rush right through it, then you might miss them.
Exactly. And now let's talk about the hunter's sleep, for instance. Well, what's that about in a sense? Because being someone who's an utter noob like myself, is it kind of a dream state that you go into to kind of begin your journey?
What is the hunter's dream? Okay. This is a really big part of the story. The hunter's dream never didn't always exist. It came around at the time of the plague. And the celestial entity that governs the moon, called the Moon Presence, otherwise known as Pale Blood, he has two names, or she, I don't know. He with a capital H, I guess, because God. It's their God. But the hunter's dream came into being by the Pale Moon, which is the god of their deity. And what the hunter's dream is a place where hunters are born into after receiving a blood transfusion, because basically what Yharnam is known for is its blood healing treatment, like I said earlier. But a lot of sick travelers travel to Yharnam to get this blood transfusion because, well, they want to be cured of the plague. But to be cured of the plague, they have to sign themselves into a contract. And what that contract entails is, we'll cure you of the plague, but you have to become a hunter. So the hunter's dream is where they're immediately transported to after being cured of the plague. And the hunter's dream basically serves as a place to rest up, heal, whatever, level up. But also Gehrman is there in his wheelchair as the hunter's advisor, and he's been there for centuries advising hunters, many, many hunters before you. And basically what they're trying to do is find a hunter that can actually end this and stop the scourge of the beast, which is the plague, the breakout. So basically what they're trying to do is they're enlisting all these hunters, trying to find at least one competent hunter that can stop this, that can make the blood moon descend and end the endless night, basically. And that whole story. But also there are hunters that were terminated. Like Jura and Eileen the Crow are two NPCs that were terminated from their contract, and they have since become hunters of hunters, which they can actually die. They don't go to a dream when they die because they have been pretty much terminated from their contract. They don't go to the hunter's dream.
So they become like game antagonists in a sense because they hunt you.
Yeah, they could be antagonists or they could be friendly. It depends on how you go about it.
So, and that's another thing we can kind of go into detail about here is the relationships. Because the great thing, and one of those things that you kind of get from the Soul series that's kind of continued in this game, is the relationships. You could either have good or bad relationships depending on how you play out the scenario. So, just a little bit about that and your experiences.
Well, my experiences, it's always good to go with the good relationships because you are rewarded with additional items. Always. And then if you go about it the bad way, you don't necessarily get all the items that you could get going about it the good way. For instance, Eileen the Crow will become a nemesis, and you'll get her badge, so you can get her weapon and armor at least, but you can't get the Hunter of Hunters Covenant Oath, which you can only get if you are on her good side. And you defeat a very, very difficult emissary, is that the word?
Yeah.
You have to defeat a really hard guy in the Cathedral Ward, and then by defeating him or cheesing him, depends on how you go about it, because there's lots of cheese moments in Bloodborne. I recommend using them whenever you can, because I died on him many times until I finally found an opportunity to cheese him. But after going through that whole thing, you get the Hunter of Hunters Covenant Oath, and by going through the whole plot line of the Vile Blood Queen, you get another oath. going through the whole plot line of, positively, of course, being on their side. If you team up with Alfred, and actually give him the unopened summons, you can actually join his covenant, which is the executioners. So you got 3 covenants in the game. Sadly, there's no patches, the spider covenant. That would have been cool if there was a spider covenant, and also another thing a lot of people are still questioning, there's no transform. You can't transform into a demon or into a beast like a lot of people thought you could, because there's a little transform meter. People thought if you can max it out, you would actually turn into a beast yourself.
Do we know
for
what
a temporary amount
is for other than that?
Basically what the transform meter is it's a blood, as you build that meter, by quick attacks, as the meter builds, the attacks become stronger, and you need to use something that does something blood attack wise. And if your blood tinge scaling is really high, say you have a weapon like the wheel, Logarius wheel, I think it's called, or the I forget the name. It's like a katana that you can put blood on it. And then there's the Beast Claw. Beast Claw is best for building this meter. And then if you equip the additional runes and oaths for transformation, it will give you so much power with every attack you do. And it builds and continuously builds with every attack if you keep the combo going. And I've seen some guys, I haven't done it myself, but I've co-opted with some guys that actually have that build, and they would take out a boss. Like, I'd just be like amazed at how fast they could take out a boss by using that build. But that's one build I haven't experimented a whole lot with. I mean, I've done an arcane build, which basically arcane is the celestial powers. People are harvesting at the School of Mensis, the college in Bergenworth or whatever. People are learning arcane powers, kind of like Harry Potter in a sense. That's where it was based from. And they learned about like arcane powers, like Abriatus, I think that's how you say the name. They studied this creature, Abriatus, that they found in the labyrinth below Yarnum, and discovered some arcane powers through Abriatus. Rom, the vacuous spider, on the other hand, which is deep below the ocean. I guess somehow you can breathe under the ocean. I don't know, walking on the ocean. I don't understand that part myself, but it hides like a lot of rituals and stuff itself that Master Willem is really, really interested in and really wants to learn, but can't because it hides the rituals and it must be slain, and that's your job. You slay it. It's a deep story. It must sound like I'm rambling. To anyone who doesn't know, Bloodborne, this is probably completely nonsense.
But in terms of the game itself, for those who don't know the game, it has one feature that the last gen of consoles didn't have with the Dark Souls series, and that is share play. It's one of the unique features that the PlayStation 4 has. And it's one of those little abilities that this console has that you can actually share the game with your friends, so they can actually play a variation of this game.
Yeah, I did that for a couple minutes.
So tell us a little bit about share play. What does it kind of entail? Because being someone like myself who doesn't own a PlayStation 4, I'm not currently on the PS4, sure, Xbox One kind of variation of console.
Share play usually only lasts for about an hour, but you can renew it. I don't know why they have a time limit on it, because after it ends, you can just start it up again for another hour. It's a really cool way. It's like basically local, playing local with someone else. Something that that online features aren't allowed. So, it's basically a way to get people that are overseas or, somewhere else to join in on the game and play, like either play as you or they can play as a second controller. Now, I had a friend not too long ago, play as me in Bloodborne because, there's a glitch in Bloodborne. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a glitch where you can actually skip like 3, 4, 5 boss fights and just skip right into like one of the last, the last half of the boss fights. So you could skip pretty much half the game. So there's a little area you could jump into. So I got my friend to share play that to do it for me, and because I just couldn't do it for the life of me.
So in terms of that glitch, is that kind of a renowned thing that's probably out there on YouTube at the moment?
Oh God, there's so many videos on YouTube on that glitch that I can't even count. And the glitch causes so many different weird things to happen. For one, if you go into Yosefka's clinic, you can find two Yosefkas, the real one and the impersonator, are both just chilling in the same clinic. So you see two dupes. They basically look the same. Another thing is if you finish Eileen's quest line, or if you don't, and get to the final battle with what is it called? It's like a cleric beast. It's in the Grand Cathedral. You would actually end up fighting both either Eileen the Crow or the Nemesis, one of the two, depending on how you go with that plot line. And you'll also end up fighting the boss of that area at the same time. So you'll have a hunter after you and a main boss after you if you use that glitch when you get to that part of the game. Yeah. So if you can get past that, I've seen people upload YouTube clips of that. But yeah, so it does kind of break the game. There was a patch just released. I think it was released last night at 3 a.m. my time. And it does make loading screens much, much faster. It used to take about 2 minutes, I'd say a minute and a half to 2 minutes to load into like the main game world. Now it's about 70% faster. So yeah, it loads like in about like 45 seconds now, maybe 40 seconds. And so not only that, the loading screens are faster, but other various gameplay improvements. Like it used to be when you run too fast, like props wouldn't pop up until you're like standing right on them, and then all of a sudden, tables would appear out of nowhere. They fixed that. And also they have loading screen messages, so you have something to read lore-wise about all the items in the game, so you can learn a little bit more about the lore of the game while you're sitting and waiting for it to load. So those are the main improvements I noticed. I don't know if they patched the skip glitch, though.
They probably will eventually, because I know it's going to get to the point where it becomes a nuisance. The other thing I want to sort of talk about this game as well is the rate of play. How much long does it take to kind of complete this game, depending if you want to go through a straight short playthrough or go for a complete playthrough like yourself? Because I know it's got a lot of content that you can actually go through, a lot of strands of storylines, and if you're a true completionist, it's going to take you a lot of time to get through it. But how much content is in there to kind of keep you hooked?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because I would hate to not have to talk about this during the podcast when I have the chance. There's a lot to the game. I mean, I would say that there's about 80 hours if you're going to go through like all the side quests and storylines. I mean, it's easy to miss a lot of storylines. Your first playthrough. I was going to say something about, a tip of the trade, and I did explain this in a video recently. A tip of the trade is to exhaust all the NPC dialogue, because if you don't go through all the dialogue, you may miss the opportunity to catch the NPC like the second time whenever they move, or wherever they may go, and finish their whole quest line. So exhaust all the NPC dialogue. Even if you've already heard it, something new may come up out of it too. Because if you've already talked about like the Vile Bloods or whatever, okay, whatever, you've talked about it with, Alfred. Well, talk about it again with Alfred, because he may add a couple more lines to it that you didn't get the first time, which I think is very clever of them to keep things from you unless you're a really true completionist. And I think that's pretty ingenious. There's also little subtle details that are very interesting. At the higher the insight number you have. Now, insight basically works for cooperative purposes, as I explained in a video I'm sure you saw. The higher the insight, the harder it gets. But not only that, but the higher the insight, the more little subtle details you'll catch. I don't want to spoil too much because I have a video coming out. But I think that's pretty. I love the detail they put in Bloodborne, but also about gameplay. I'd say your first time through could be about 80 hours, depending on which ending you get and how much you do. But then there's the Chalice dungeons. Have you heard about those at all?
The Chalice dungeons? No, I haven't heard about those. Tell us a little bit more. Kind of enlighten me on this one.
Okay, the Chalice dungeons are. Miyazaki put it plainly, or a way of extending the gameplay and keeping the game fun and fresh and new. Because with New Game Plus, not much changes besides the difficulty of the beasts, and there really isn't anything new. Like, whereas Dark Souls 2, when you beat the game, right after you spawn into New Game Plus, suddenly there's falconeers, like, throwing falcons at you, and you're like, holy crap, this wasn't here before. They don't do that in Bloodborne. It's basically the same exact game. But what they have are the Chalice dungeons, and throughout the game you collect various artifacts that can be used to create rituals to open these dungeons. And essentially, story-wise, these dungeons are labyrinths beneath the Yharnam. So they do connect to the story in some minute way, not too huge, but what they are, for the most part, the root dungeons, they're called root, are ever changing, which means they are different for everyone. So they're basically randomly generated dungeons. They're different for everyone. You don't know what to expect around every corner. And there's plenty of loot to grab. And there is like another 60 hours to be found in just the Chalice dungeons.
So in combination, you've got probably over 100 hours worth of play there, probably 140 hours in that sense.
Which is pretty much what Dark Souls, offered, about that much gameplay.
Well, that's actually kind of awesome in a sense, because for me, seeing the way that a lot of games have gone, a lot of people have been complaining on the fact that they've been paying something like, say, $60 for a game, some $70 for a game. Over here it's like 40 to 50 pounds for a game, and it's really short, or there's lack of content or lack of story.
Like The Order.
A lot of people have been complaining about that game, because it was expected to be something really big. Again,
no, not at all.
These games tend to have a lot of hype machines behind them. And I think,
how much money, you put into marketing and advertising, with enough money, you can get anyone to buy your game.
Yeah, and pretty much. And the one thing that I liked about Bloodborne was they didn't do that. They released some kind of screenshots. They let the game kind of speak for itself in a sense. Mm. Those people who bought the Dark Souls series of games knew what they were getting out of this. They knew it was going to be something very interesting.
Even I think it was the CEO of Microsoft, of Xbox, pretty much said, congratulations to Sony in a tweet on selling 1 million units of Bloodborne. I think that's pretty amazing that Microsoft, was just like, hey, good job. A new IP is not easy to sell.
Yeah, and the one thing I have to agree with on that one is, like, Phil Spencer's actually kind of a breath of fresh air in terms of being...
Yeah, it's him.
Yeah, Phil. He's the guy who took over, and he's kind of not... He's not a dick, I think is the word to kind of say. He's the guy who respects the gamers, who respects gaming, and he's a very interesting kind of person, a very nice individual, and he has respect for his competitors. He respects Nintendo, he respects Sega, and he respects Sony, he respects everybody, and understands that gaming, the industry itself, is a big selling industry, but it's one of those hard industries to get new IPs over, as you've stated. And, From Software, again, with what they tend to do is they won't put a lot of marketing and PR in their stuff, but they will let the game speak for itself.
Well, Namco Bandai advertised the hell out of Dark Souls 2.
Yeah. And a lot of it was like getting playtesters like myself to actually test the game and talk about it and review it. And it's a great thing to see when you can see From's not like a big company. I would call them they're kind of...
They have an A staff and a B staff, but they aren't that big. No.
Yeah, they're a developer studio in a sense. They're not this big, huge company like, say, Capcom or Ubisoft or even Namco Bandai, as you've previously iterated.
I can see them growing though at this point.
Yeah, if they keep doing what they're doing at the moment, and I think the great thing about it is they will sell you on their games by the sheer quality
Mhm.
rather than the quantity of the game or the pizzazz.
Well, there's both.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And they always manage to put in a hell of a lot of content, great content that lets you kind of play through these games. And with the Soul series of games, or if it's an RPG, you get a lot of content, but there's very hit and miss in terms of the games themselves. Like, I can tell you a big game that I played a while ago that I hated, which was Watch Dogs. And a lot of it was because the marketing PR and the hype train behind it was so huge, but when you got into it, the game wasn't there. You know, it was just, a lot of it was just filler. And I can tell with the Soul series, when I played that, there was no filler in that game. Every nook and cranny was explained, and you could go through, and it allowed you, like someone like myself, and of course yourself, who would go through a game and just want to kind of farm. You know, you want to go in there, collect as many items as you can, go through everything, so you can encapsulate yourself and immerse yourself in this game and its story. So how, you know, in terms of Bloodborne, was there any negatives behind this game that you sat there and just went, oh, I wish they didn't do that?
Well, you were speaking of content. There is an issue I have with content, is there aren't too many collectibles. Like, there aren't that many weapons. There aren't that many outfits. At least not compared to a Dark Souls game. I mean, there's I guess there's enough, but I wish there was more content, more variety. I mean, there are so many times that I see someone dressed like me, or I see someone using the same weapon as me. I mean, the axe is the most popular weapon, of course. So I'm trying to experiment a little, use different other weapons, but I just wish there was more, and that's why I'm hoping for maybe some DLC in the future to fix that, to counteract that.
I think they're probably going to release, because this game is fairly new in a sense, so they probably will end up releasing a lot more DLC to kind of whet the appetites of fans like yourself.
Yeah, but I can't see how much more they're going to do. I mean, their explanation I read in an interview for the lack of weapons was, well, because there's so many different attack moves you can do. There's a switch animation where you can switch it into a longer weapon, or you can switch it into a different weapon entirely. That makes it like two weapons in one, basically. And I can understand from a developer standpoint that creating weapons that act as two different weapons is not easy to do. So, I mean, I can understand why the lack of variety, because, you know, having a switch mode is the first time any other games have ever done that.
So, in terms of, like, as you said, in terms of other things in content, you've got, like, the lack of weapons, but there are certain things that you can do. For instance, you know, you've got basically guns and pistol use in this game, which in comparison to the Soul series, that didn't have that. You know, that was more kind of, you have your sword, you have your bow.
Yeah, people were really worried about guns being in this game, and there's only one shield that you can find in this game, and I guess people are using it because they find that, you know, it's easier just to shield up and take damage and then go in for an attack, but it doesn't really block too much damage, and it breaks it breaks your guard really easily. So the shield is basically useless, in my opinion. But the guns, people were worried about the guns because they thought, oh, guns, now it's over. But no, they act as like basically the shield did in Dark Souls and parrying. When you did L2 in Dark Souls, it would parry an attack if you timed it just right. That's basically how the firearm works. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage at the beginning, but you can find guns that do more damage later on in the game. You can find guns that can do a heck of a lot of damage too, like a cannon. But they consume a lot of bullets, though, you know? So you can only carry 20 bullets at one time, and if a gun is going to use 10 bullets in one shot, you got 2 shots, and that's it. So if you miss it, you know, you're out of bullets, you're done. So
in terms of, like, the gun themselves, they're used kind of to complement your artillery, like what you actually have, rather than be used as the main weapon.
Yes, they're basically to complement by staggering or parrying.
So, in terms of enemies, in Dark Souls, you had all these big and bads that you would go against. Every time you go through kind of a portal. What is that more kind of similar in Bloodborne, or is that different in terms of the way that the enemies go? Because, as you said, you've got certain people that you have to talk to, certain missions that you have to accomplish before you make your way to the enemies, or can you kind of backdoor to the enemies and just forget about doing any of the side quests in a sense?
You mean, are you asking if there are optional enemies?
More the fact that how in Dark Souls you could segue to the bosses. You could just go straight to the boss and beat the bosses rather than go through any side quests or talk to any people, even focus on any of the story.
Oh, yeah. You could just go straight to boss, to boss, to boss, to boss, and not really worry about any story or doing anything else if you wanted. I mean, speedrunning this game, this is a speedrunner's dream, to be honest. Speedrunning this game is really fun to do. And I'm a speedrunner myself, and I'm looking to speedrun it at some point.
Are you gonna?
But yeah, the bosses pretty much act like Dark Souls. There are fog walls you go through, and then the fight's on, basically. And you could summon people in, just like Dark Souls, only you use bells instead of soapstones. And the bells resonate with each other, and then you can either go into their world or they'll come to your world. PvP is different, though. Someone needs to be ringing a chime of the Sinister Bell to actually initiate PvP. So you have to go to a PvP hotspot, somewhere where there's a lot of PvP, and chime your bell and initiate it that way. So invading someone's game that is unaware of you coming to fight them is very rare. There are instances where this does happen, but it's like one or two times in the game, and it's very rare.
So let's talk about the bells themselves, since you brought them up. I was looking at how you all managed to sort of like equip weapons, and you equip kind of these bells. Can you tell us a little bit about what these bells do and why they're so useful in Bloodborne?
Well, you got the beckoning bell, and the beckoning bell basically summons someone in to help you in your game. You can have up to 2 co-op players summon in, so 3 total, including you. And it's very useful for, especially in New Game Plus, for those really, really hard bosses. Of course, just like Dark Souls, the bosses get a little bit harder with the more people that you summon in. But they're very useful for, say there is a fight in the Forbidden Woods that is like a 3-enemy duo or a triple enemy. So there's 3 people to focus on. And it definitely helps to have at least one other person to distract the other 2 while you fight the main one, But the small bell basically works as you, outside the fog wall, you ring the small bell and you can go into someone else's game and help them. It's as simple as that, really.
So, in terms of like the multiplayer functions, you touched on a little bit on the PvP, the play versus player, and also the cooperative gameplay. What kind of difference between the two? How, say, like if someone like myself is just going into multiplayer, which one would you say would be the strongest component?
If you're looking to just multiplayer only?
Yeah, if you say like I want to go into multiplayer, and I want to kind of play with people, what one would you say would be the best kind of side for it? Because like you've got the player version.
This is a hard question. It really depends on if you're a multiplayer kind of guy. I mean, if you would prefer to play with friends, then yeah, it's good. But there is a big chance that you could miss a lot of items from lack of exploring because you and your multiplayer friends just want to blast through it and get to the boss, So you could miss some major items doing it that way. 2, the people you summon in don't get the same items you do. They don't get the same completion. And this is the problem I have with the dungeons, is that if you summon someone in for the dungeons, which is a rare opportunity because there's so many different dungeons, but if you actually do summon someone in, they don't get the special ritual materials, that you get, which makes it kind of pointless, as a summon to actually play those dungeons. Like, it makes it very pointless unless you're just bored and don't have anything else to do. So I wish in a new update, I hope that they actually change that and make it so that when 2 players or 3 players go into a dungeon together, that they all achieve the same, ritual items and rare items and get the same completion stats. Because otherwise, the co-op partner has to go through on his own on a separate game to go get the same things that he just co-opted with you, that you just got, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so, in terms of their completion stats and what they get from co-oping the game with you, is there any incentive? Do you get something from doing that you wouldn't get if you're doing it on your own?
Well, if you're helping people, you do get insight for every boss you kill. You get all the souls that you do from killing regular enemies. But more importantly, there's really no risk. When you get summoned in, you don't have to worry too much about dying because you don't really lose anything when you die. So I guess that's the incentive, is that you don't lose anything. You can just go and slay a bunch of enemies, get lots of souls, and beat a boss, get some insight. And there's no risk in doing so.
So do you like, in terms of trophies, because I know there's a lot of people who play PlayStation and Xbox games for the trophies themselves, because if you own a Wii U, you don't really care. What are the kind of trophies that you can get? Have you played the game to kind of achieve any trophies for yourself?
Oh, yeah. I got all the trophies. There are 3 that require you to play the Chalice dungeons to almost the very end. You have to get pretty far into the Chalice dungeons to get 3 of the trophies, unfortunately. So there are 3 tied to that. But generally, the trophies are really easy. I mean, you beat every boss you beat, you get a trophy. You get a trophy for getting all the what is it? I think you get a trophy for all the runes or oaths. You also get a trophy for all the weapons, getting all the weapons. You get a trophy for getting I don't know. They're all very simple trophies that you can easily get just on your first playthrough or second playthrough.
How long do you think it usually takes to complete all the trophies for your collection?
Well, I still got 3 trophies to get, and it's going to require me to go through the first 3 Thumerian root chalices, which I have gotten through all. I'm on the lower Thumerian root chalice now, and then after that, I got to go to the alien. I forget what it's called, root chalice, and on layer 2 is a weapon called the Beast Claw, which will unlock the final trophy that I need. The final trophy for the weapons, collect all weapons trophy. And then there's, you got to collect a really important rune, a blood gem, not rune. You got to collect a blood gem that's really powerful, and to do that, you got to go to really deep in the catacombs of the labyrinth of the dungeons. And it's basically, in a sense, it's a dungeon crawler. I mean, we've all played dungeon crawlers, right? I mean, you've played a dungeon crawler. You ever played Diablo?
Yes,
like the old ones?
Diablo 3 at the moment that I'm going through on the PlayStation 3.
Mm-hmm. It's a very limited dungeon crawler. I mean, there's not like magic or anything like that. I mean, there's arcane. Arcane is their version of magic in the game, but it uses bullets instead of MP, if you know what I mean. And it uses a lot of bullets, which makes using magic very difficult as an arcane build. You gotta stock up on bullets and pretty much use all the runes that give you +2, +3, +4 bullets, so that you can have enough bullets to use, say, like the choir bell. The choir bell heals and invigorates all your co-op friends. That uses 8 bullets. Just so basically, at a regular build with 20 bullets is your max, you can use it twice, and you got to be really close to them to use it and to get it to work. So I don't know. There's some things that I really don't like about the arcane build. I don't feel like they put a lot of thought into the arcane magic. But at least it's there, because I was told before the game came out that there was going to be no magic at all, period. So it's good that it's there.
yeah, it's niche. It's part of it's ingrained as part of the game instead of actually not like being there at all. The one other thing I want to ask is about classes in terms of the game, because you did talk about it a little bit. In terms of like Dark Souls, you had a number of different classes, a number of different characters that you could play, and how each like one of those would affect your game.
Yeah.
Like certain weapons you'd pick up, certain items that you would have.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, everyone basically has the same class, to be honest. There's no fat rolling. All outfits are made to be light and nimble, hence the fast gameplay. There's no shields because they don't want you to be turtling. There's basically all just the same class, and the class is Hunter. And what weapon you decide to wield is really your choice. It doesn't really change your class. Your class is still going to be just Hunter. But there are heavier weapons. There's a big Ludwig sword, I think it's called. Big sword that it's a great sword that converts into a little sword.
Wow.
It's funny. Yeah, you pull a little sword out of the great sword. It's interesting. And then there's the hammer, the Kirk hammer, I think it's called, and it basically acts the same way. You pull a little sword out of a cinder block, basically. So it goes from a cinder block, which is really slow, but does a lot of heavy damage, to a small little, basically a rapier, which is fast, quick, and it stabs. So you have two different weapon styles right there, where you can go fast and nimble, or you can go really slow and heavy in one weapon. So there really isn't a choice of class in this game. But if it really comes down to it, there's magic, there's arcane build, which if you really want to focus on the arcane and actually bring your arcane up to say like level 40 or higher, you can be very successful at that and use lots of arcane items. You'll have to have all the right runes equipped, of course, to actually be successful. And then there's the Beasthood stat, which requires a low insight to really take full advantage of. And the lower your insight, the less frenzy has an impact on you, because, well, you're basically already close or borderline beast. So, of course, going insane is not as easy. So frenzy you have a higher frenzy resist in that. And so there's the Beasthood build, which you can get with the Beast Claw and, attack really fast and all that. And then there's the Beast Roar, which is an item in the game that can push enemies over. So there's two classes there, which is the Beasthood stat, which requires low insight, and then the Arcane, which requires high insight. And then there's just the basic strength build, how much HP you want, how much stamina you want, just the regular Hunter class. So there's basically only 3 classes if you really want to get down to it.
Oh, awesome. So,
but yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, go for it, Fungo.
I was going to say, I do want to talk a little bit about Scholar of the First Sin, the new Dark Souls 2 release on the PS4, before we end this podcast. So let me know when we're nearing then so I can talk about it.
I want to get into kind of one of the major factors about Bloodborne, in the sense in the game itself. Now, for those of people who haven't seen Fungo's channel, I think you need to go over to Fungo's YouTube
Yes,
channel.
I got plenty more Bloodborne videos coming.
Yeah, check the link below for us, and I'll give Fungo a chance to kind of plug his channel later on anyway, and I'll pop a link on the video. If you're on YouTube, there'll be a link at the top where you can actually just click on there to go directly to his channel to check out his Bloodborne videos. Now, the one thing that I want to ask you is in terms of the selling point of this game. What, for you, if you are like selling this to anybody else, if you're going to sell the game to kind of me or any Joe Schmo who is teetering on the fence of buying this game, what would it be?
Okay. If you like a game that doesn't hold your hand, has good challenge, and you like fast action role playing, just you like to be nimble and quick, and you like lots of weapons, and you like lots of gore, and you love Lovecraftian story, Victorian era, this is probably your game. If you like that atmosphere, if you like that gameplay, this would be your game. Does that make sense? Did I structure that sentence correctly?
Yeah, I think it does make a lot of sense. And also, I believe they have released bundles for the PlayStation 4 where you can actually purchase this game with the PS4. So it'll be your package.
I wish. Only in Europe.
Only in Europe. So if you do want to get the game, go for that, or just buy yourself a PlayStation 4 pre-owned, grab a copy of this game as well, and get yourself...
Can I tell you a little secret?
Yeah, go for it.
I bought a PS4 for it.
I remember when you first showed that picture on your Facebook timeline. It was like, look what I have, and then you just had the PlayStation 4. I was like, jealous.
I got it way in advance too. I think I got it back in December or earlier. I think I got it earlier, November, just in anticipation of this game. Now this game was delayed from February something to March something. It was only like a month and a half, but it definitely gave me a good amount of time to actually catch up on other PS4 games that I might have missed. Like, for instance, Resident Evil Remaster came out on the PS4. It came out on the PS3 as well, but it looks a higher frame rate, I guess, on the PS4.
Yeah, and it came out on PC as well.
Yeah, it came out everywhere. Capcom maximizing profit.
Yeah, and they sold over 1 million copies, didn't they, on that game?
Just recently, yeah, that's a news article that just came out. Let's see, there was an edition of Surgeon Simulator that came out for the PS4 that allows for co-op. So you can actually, you and a buddy or share play can both get your arms in there and operate. And it's probably I think it's one of my favorite simulator games, honestly, is Surgeon Simulator.
Also, it gives you a chance to get your hands dirty. I'm kind of one of those guys, when I get interested about something, I'll find everything about it. It's one of the reasons why when I went into acting, I wanted to find out everything. I'd go to film sets and I'd watch all the processes, and if I was in the theatre, I'd have a look at all the processes and the mechanics and how things work.
And the way I am with games, I'm the same way in real life. So, I mean, I got to find out everything too. Yeah,
it's probably one of the reasons why we gel so much. But it's kind of one of my things when I have an interest in anything. Long story short, a long time ago, when I had a huge interest in professional wrestling, I decided to become a professional wrestler, and I started wrestling and doing all that stuff until I ended up breaking my ankle. But it's one of those things. It hurt like hell. But it's one of those things that I always find defining. And one of the things that I think is a selling point of Fungo's channel, for those who haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the Twin Perfect Silent Hill retrospective that they did, check out Fungo's channel, because he does that with everything. Well,
I try to anyway, but I also try to be a little goofy and silly too. Something that I also did in the real Silent Hill experience.
Yeah, and it's very entertaining at the same time, because it brings out a lot of what you're... And I was saying this to someone the other day, because we did a podcast last week called Burhan and the Boy. It was myself and Dave Wade would sit down and just waffle. It was a waffle podcast that we would just sit down and just talk. And one of the things we said about people who wanted to make YouTube their career, in a sense, which I don't think YouTube is a career for anybody. It's kind of a nice way to make money and get yourself noticed, but it's never a career. And for those people,
you should move on. Once you make it on YouTube, you should definitely move on, is my opinion.
Exactly.
Move on to something greater, because YouTube isn't going to be the way it is now forever. You got to make yourself a steady career.
Yeah. But the one thing I always say, it's engaging. And the one thing that I will say about your channel is you're very, very engaging. It's like I can sit down and go through a half-an-hour video that you do very easily, because you're engaging, you're on point, and you also make it fun to kind of watch.
Well, gee, enough about me.
I'm kissing your ass a lot today. I really need to get some chapstick. But it is one of those things that I enjoy. And if you haven't checked out Fungo's channel, please do. Because, like, comment, subscribe, check out his Bloodborne videos, and then make your way down to the rest of his channel list. I've been through a lot of his Let's Plays. I've gone through a lot of his reviews and videos. And, Fungo was one of the reasons why I bought a PS Vita and I bought Tearaway. Because you did that review on it, and I loved the game. And it's one of those games that, because it was so good, I've shared it with my brother to actually give it a go, because he's a huge fan, not only of yourself, and the Silent Hill retrospective that you did, but he's also a fan of your reviews. So I gave him my copy of that game to sort of play through and have a go. Even though I always say that the PS Vita, it was actually far superior than the Nintendo 3DS, the previous iteration Nintendo 3DS. The new iteration...
Yeah, and it makes me sad that the PS Vita isn't gaining more ground, to be honest.
I think a lot of that's due to Sony, though, isn't it? Because they didn't know what to do with it.
Sony's been pretty poor at marketing. I think that's probably it.
Yeah. So, going on from that, now let's
talk a little about Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin. Yes?
Yeah. So,
just really
basically,
quick.
Another game you've had experience with and that you've played through and done reviews on is Dark Souls 2. We did talk a little bit about the video that you did where you said that Dark Souls 2 wasn't as great as Dark Souls 1, but you recanted that here live on this podcast. Yay us.
I'm not really recanting it. I mean, they're both good in different aspects, but a lot of people seem to prefer the first one because of the whole, I don't know, poise system. They split up all the different stats and just made it so complicated. I don't think people really like that.
Yeah.
But I personally am a fan of the leveling system and the stats. But what Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin was a re-release that just came out on the 7th, I think. And I have to say, it actually managed to make the game even worse. It is so bad. In terms of lore, it is bad. And I want to explain this a little bit further in a video, but just to say right off the bat, if anyone's listening to this, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this, don't get Scholar of the First Sin. I see a lot of praise for it, and I don't know why. What they did, basically, was they mixed up all the different enemy locations, but what they did was kind of break the lore, in essence, too, by doing that. Like, they put a dragon where it shouldn't be, which breaks all mysteriousness of the dragon right at the very beginning of the game. Why a dragon here? You're supposed to see a dragon later on in Dragon Eerie, where it's like, whoa, there's dragons everywhere, this is amazing. But they put a dragon right dead center, almost at the beginning of the game, that you have to fight, and you're like, what is this dragon doing here? And it's such low level, you can kill it in like 5 attacks. So it's like, why the F did you even do this? Number 2, is like the bucket knights.
Saturday Night Live skit, isn't it? Where it goes, needs more cowbell, and it's like, needs more dragon.
Yeah, exactly. And then the bucket knights, which used to be mysterious, kind of these lone warriors that kind of gave up. I like to think that they just kind of gave up. They're reminiscing. They're just kind of sitting there relaxing. They've been through a lot. They're war torn, I guess. And when you engage them, that's when they'll get up and start fighting back. There's 3 of them found in the game. Well, in Scholar of the First Sin, they are everywhere. And you don't have to encounter them. You don't have to make them hostile for them to come after you. But they are literally on every corner, everywhere. Especially in the Hyde's Tower of Flame area. And after you've engaged them, they'll come after you relentlessly. They'll chase you through the level. And that breaks kind of the lore in my mind of them just being lone warriors. There only being 3 of them. Now there's like 80 of them. And they'll engage you no matter what. And they don't drop anything when you kill them.
Someone's been doing some breeding, I think. You know, they probably, when you last logged off the game, they've been like fucking like rabbits. And procreate.
Yeah, they're breeding.
Either that or they found cloning.
So it just makes me angry that they did those changes. I know they're like trying to spark new life into Dark Souls. Like, oh, it's a new experience. No, it pisses me off. It's not a new experience. It's just changing things. It's not a good thing.
What's the story like on it though? Does the story kind of tweak itself to allow these changes, or?
No, the story's still the same, but they just throw new enemies at you. Enemies that don't belong in certain areas will be in these areas, and you'll be like looking at it going, wait a second, aren't you supposed to be in the castle that we encounter like 3 hours from now? I haven't even gotten to that castle, and you're sitting here in the woods. What are you doing in the woods? You know, so you think like that, you know, and then they add like, the changes they make are just unforgivable. Plus the life of protection rings, when you eventually do find them, when broken, they break easier, by the way. They cost about let's see, they went from 3,000 souls to fix to 14,000 souls to fix. So they're like hey, those life protection rings, they broke the game. Well, I got so used to them, to repairing them and using them, that now in Scholar of the First Sin, it's going to cost me a buttload to fix them, and I don't want to use them now. And I think that was their goal, but in doing that, I think that they kind of made the game worse. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about.
So they basically made the game a lot more difficult.
I don't see anyone complaining about these things, though. I'm like the only one that really hates their re-release. But guys listening to this pod, I don't know what to freshen the series, to make it more fresh for everyone, to make it a fresh new experience. Like, you don't know what to expect around every turn. Like, for instance, the Pursuer boss fight, which is like the second boss fight you ever see. I don't know if you got to that point, but there is a Pursuer that you fight, and he shows up at different locations in the game, namely 2 different locations. But now he shows up like at least 3 times in every area of the game. He shows up. That's bad. And then there's this the pirate monster, which is solely designed for the pirate ship as the boss in the pirate ship. I know it shows up in another later part of the game, which is okay, it's acceptable, but this pirate monster is overused now, and it was a boss, but now it's like everywhere. I don't know. There's a lot of changes they made to the enemy placements that I find frustrating.
I can imagine on that one.
And they made the game easier. They said they were making the game harder, but like there's one boss fight, for example, which is the Skeleton Lord room, where you fight 3 different Skeleton Lords. Then the wheels come out, and we know the infamous wheels in Dark Souls 1. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
And they downright piss you off, right?
Yeah, they freaking annoyed the fucking shit out of me.
Well, they do make an appearance in Dark Souls 2, only they aren't as cheap. But they went from, they used to spawn 5 wheels in the boss room, now they only spawn 2. So they made it easier. Yeah. Now, normally I'm like, yeah, get rid of those fucking wheels. I hate the wheels. Get rid of them. But in this case, it's like, oh, come on, why are you making it easier? But yeah, so there are changes. Now, this is an alternative I can give you guys, though. All the new enhancements, all the new lore story, they did give a new ending in this version of the game. There's a whole new ending. You can get that as a free update. They updated to 1.15 to the vanilla version of Dark Souls 2. So they added all the new features, plus you can buy all the DLC separate. And you can buy all that without all these weird enemy placements and weird changes that they made. And you can get all the new lore just by getting the old version of Dark Souls 2 and patching it. And I recommend everyone do that instead. But if you absolutely must have it on the PS4, then go get Scholar of the First Sin. And if you've never played it before, then you probably won't be angry about the enemy placements, because you won't know any different.
Very, very true. Now, what I want to do as kind of a new little thing on this show that we do with our guests, I want to talk about what you're currently playing at the moment, Fungo. With the exception, of course, of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2. What games do you tend to play?
Mortal Kombat 9 is or 10 right now. It just came out like a week and a half ago, I think.
Yeah,
maybe 2 weeks.
They've breathed new life into that game with the story. I'm going to be putting up a review on that game quite recently, because I gave it a bit of a playthrough with one of my friends.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was just as good as Mortal Kombat 9, to be honest.
Yeah, and they've made the game rather story driven a lot more now, rather than they've added layers to it rather than taking anything away from it. And they've got like a new couple of new features, including the quitality in the game as well. So if you're playing like an online play and you don't want to get killed, and you quit the game, they do a quitality on you,
or your head explodes.
I think it's brilliant.
I think story-wise, Mortal Kombat 9, the game that preceded it, definitely had about the same length of story. And what it did was, it was basically a reboot in that it told the story of Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, essentially. So it told the story of the first 3 games. And I think Mortal Kombat 10 is a good continuation of that. And it definitely fixed, and it definitely sped things up a little in combat, in terms of combat, and pulling off combos and stuff. And the brutalities are just sick. I mean, sick as in awesome. I love the brutalities, but they make you jump through hoops to get the brutalities to work. So I don't really like that. But if you do pull it off, and if it gets pulled off to you, it's kind of like a slap to the face, you know, when you get brutality. Because it's like, oh, that person had to work for that, you know?
Do you disagree
so it's a slap in the face.
Do you disagree with what they've done where they've added microtransactions into the game? So say, like, if you're playing like your friend or colleague...
For easy fatalities? Nah. I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah.
If people want to pay for that, then that's fine. I think it's a dumb move, but hey, if people are going to pay for that and they're going to make money off of it, why not? I'm not going to pay for it. But if people are going to do it, yeah, sure, why not? But the one thing I do have a problem with is the DLC that unlocks everything in the crypt. Yeah. Now, that blows a whole chunk of the fun right out of the game. Like, the fun is actually exploring these tombs, you know, finding all the different, you know, collectibles in the crypt, and actually, like, unlocking all these things on your own. There are easy guides on the internet to find all the alternate costumes and all the brutalities and fatalities. You can find guides on that, but to actually just purchase $20, well, it's $20 in the US anyway, and just, like, you know, buy everything that's in the crypt, then what is there to explore? There's nothing. It's like a whole, like, 2 or 3 hours of the game that you could have invested and enjoyed, just gone.
No, I agree, and I think there's this whole bragging rights situation. So people, you know, those who paid for it will just be like, oh yeah, I've got everything in the tombs.
Yeah, and then they're doing fatalities that you can only unlock, and right off the bat, day one, because they purchased it.
Yeah, and I agree, and it's one of those things that kind of annoy me. I think microtransactions in payable games shouldn't be there. I'm a fan of DLC. And the game that I'm playing at the moment, because the DLC has just been released on the 23rd instead of May, is basically Mario Kart. I think Nintendo know how to do DLC, and they do it really well. Mario Kart
I think 8... Steam does it the best, because most DLC from Steam is free.
Well, Nintendo basically...
Valve, not Steam, but Valve.
Well, Nintendo did this thing where you paid £11 and you get both DLC packs, which includes 12 new maps, and cups.
That's not bad.
And you get like 6 downloadable characters as well.
Oh, yeah.
And also extra carts, and you know, and it includes a lot of the old stuff. Like, I'm a big Mario Kart fan since I was a kid, so Rainbow Road from the SNES actually makes an appearance in this. You play as Link from the
Aren't there 2 different ones?
Yeah, you've got like the Villager as well. You've got all these other like games and maps that revolve around other games, and it's great. It makes it a very fun experience. I hope this isn't the end of their DLC. I hope they've got some more DLC packs that are coming out for this game, because it makes it really fresh, and it allows people to kind of like play through this game in a new sort of way. And they've got 200cc on there, which is
people want like more content. Like, in terms of Bloodborne, there's no I think I read an interview from Miyazaki that there's no plans for DLC at the moment. But looking at that they sold 1 million copies, they could easily make a lot of money if they do. So I'm expecting some DLC in the future on that.
I am too. I think From Software are, again, they're one of those companies that kind of put quality at the forefront over quantity.
I mean, look at Dark Souls 2. It got the best DLC out of any game ever. Because, well, first they released the Crown Trilogy. Every month they released a new, like, area, basically, that essentially added, like, 8 to 10 hours to the game. So every month I'm, like, really looking forward to a new Crown DLC package. And then finally after that they released the Scholar of the First Sin, which essentially extends the ending, because I found the ending to be a little lackluster. So finally they fixed that with, you know, adding a new character, which is called Scholar of the First Sin.
So they've managed to kind of like bring a lot more to the game. And I think in terms of content, in terms of DLC, it's always done right when they do something that adds to the game, not strip the game down and try and sell it off for parts.
Like on disc DLC is not acceptable. If it's already made and done by the time you distribute the game, that's not fair. Just give it to us,
Totally agree. And I think, when it comes down to it, if people look at, like, I know Nintendo gets a lot of bad reps for a lot of what they do on the internet, and also for the fact that they kind of don't listen to their consumer base. They're getting a bit better with that. But check out, like, the Mario Kart 8 DLC. Check out the DLC they've done for the Super Mario Bros. U, the Super Luigi U. They're getting to grips with it, and they're doing it right. And I think the same can be said from in terms of what they can do. They have some amazing DLC for these games. Check out Bloodborne. If you haven't already bought it, why not? If you need a deciding factor, go to Fungo's channel. So Fungo, tell us where we can find you. You're about everywhere. You're on Hitbox. You're on Twitch.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah. So
you just search Fungo, Fungo, on YouTube. You'll find me. I'm the first one that'll pop up.
Or click the link at the bottom there as well to all these little links, including his Twitter, where we can find you on there as well.
Wait, I don't see the links. Where are they?
Oh, they're going to be there because this is a pre-tape show. So
I don't see the links. So where are they?
Okay.
They're down there. They're down there. I'll believe you. I believe you that the links are down there.
Imaginary finger pointing down to the imaginary tab at the bottom with all the links, and also you can click the link at the top of the video there as well. And if you're on iTunes, you download it off iTunes. Just go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/igotgameplay or facebook.com/fungo. And check out Fungo's many reviews. He updates his Facebook page. He's on Twitter as well. And he's everywhere, guys. If you haven't heard of Fungo, you're really living under a rock.
Yeah, just Google.
Just Google Fungo. Fungo.
And hopefully you won't find something about baseball because, there are fungo bats.
Oh.
And then fungo is also Italian for mushroom. So maybe you'll come across some bats infested with mushrooms.
So is that where you kind of originated the name from?
No, not really. No. Did you know the name of the dog in 101 Dalmatians? The name of the male dog is Fungo.
I never knew that. The more you know.
Yeah. I pretty much was named after
that. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of I Got Gameplay. And Fungo, is there anything else that you want to tell our lovely audience before you go?
Nope. But thank you very much for listening to my, rant about Bloodborne, and I hope you learned something about Bloodborne. I hope that I maybe gave you a second guess on Scholar of the First Sin, because I think that this enhanced, quote unquote, version of Scholar of the First Sin is not necessary. If you have the PC version of the game, just go ahead and get it. But I hope you enjoyed this podcast and everything that was said between us. And thank you so much. Michael, can I say, do you go by your name on podcast?
Yeah, I go by.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, for inviting me on. I really had fun.
Oh, I enjoyed it myself, and it's great having you on because, every time I manage to get people that have been on here before, and a lot of people have had so much fun on I Got Gameplay episodes, it's always great talking to you. I always find with yourself, it's like having a kindred spirit, someone who understands the emotion of story and also is very passionate about gaming, like we all are, like everyone who listens to the show.
I love you too, Michael.
Oh, thank you.
Let's get married.
It's guys.
Let's run off. Let's elope.
Compromise. But there you go, guys. Now, just make sure I'm going to be at Play Expo in Blackpool by the time you listen to this recording. Of course, you can check me out there if you're in Blackpool. I'll be there with the rest of the Retro Island crew. We are just announced that we were going to be covering it as the live media team for RetroIsland.com. So make sure you check us out there. If you want to find out more from me, I'm on my own YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheNerdGenius. I do gaming reviews, I do film reviews, and I'm also doing a new little series called Who's That Pokemon? And basically,
little jack of all trades you are.
I am, yeah. And it's a funny little comedic series where we do our own version of Who's That Pokemon, but we add gaming personalities and characters. So check those out as well, guys. And as always, for Fungo, of course, for Michael Burhan, and for everybody else out there in gaming land, this is Michael Burhan saying that we've got gameplay.
We've got gameplay.
See you again, folks.
See ya.